What happens when one of the most controversial royals meets one of late night's most ruthless hosts? You won't believe what unfolds when Prince Harry sits down with Stephen Colbert for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. The tension that erupted on stage last night has left Hollywood speechless and social media in absolute chaos. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds when royal protocol collides with American television brutality. The Late Show studio was buzzing with anticipation as Prince Harry made his entrance to thunderous applause. Fresh off his latest memoir revelations and ongoing legal battles with British tabloids, the Duke of Sussex appeared confident, even jovial, as he settled into the guest chair across from Stephen Colbert. The audience was primed for another one of those carefully orchestrated celebrity conversations that usually fill late-night slots, but what they witnessed instead was a masterclass in how quickly television can spiral into uncharted territory. Colbert opened with his trademark sardonic smile, immediately setting a tone that felt different from his usual celebrity interviews. "Your Royal Highness," he began, emphasizing the title with just enough sarcasm to make it sting. "Or should I say, former Royal Highness? I can never keep track of these royal protocols, especially when they keep changing." The audience laughed, but Harry's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered with practiced grace. "Just Harry is fine, Stephen," the prince replied, his British accent cutting through the studio air with diplomatic precision. "I think we've moved past the need for all that formality, haven't we?" But Colbert wasn't interested in moving past anything. He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes gleaming with the kind of predatory interest that had made him famous for skewering politicians and public figures alike. "Have we, though? Because it seems like you want it both ways, doesn't it? You want to be just Harry when it's convenient, but you're still trading on that royal brand every chance you get. I mean, that's literally how you got this book deal, isn't it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge thrown down between them. Harry shifted slightly in his seat, his media training kicking in as he maintained his composure. "I think there's a difference between acknowledging who I am and exploiting it, Stephen. I've been very transparent about my journey and why I've chosen to share my story." "Transparent," Colbert repeated, savoring the word like it was something distasteful. "That's an interesting choice of words from someone who spent the better part of a decade complaining about media intrusion, only to turn around and become the media. You've done Netflix deals, Spotify deals, book deals, interview after interview. At what point does transparency become just another word for cashing in?" The studio audience, initially supportive of their royal guest, began to sense the shift in atmosphere. This wasn't the usual late-night banter they were accustomed to. Harry's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "I think you're oversimplifying a very complex situation, Stephen. When you've had your entire life scrutinized, when you've watched your mother destroyed by the very system you're talking about, sometimes speaking your truth becomes a matter of survival, not profit." Colbert pounced on the opening like a shark sensing blood in the water. "Ah, there it is, the Diana card. Tell me, Harry, how do you think your mother would feel about you airing the family's dirty laundry on every platform that'll have you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're doing exactly what the tabloids did to her, except now you're the one getting paid for it." The comparison hit its mark with surgical precision. Harry's composure cracked visibly, his cheeks flushing with a combination of anger and something that looked dangerously close to shame. The audience had gone completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something far more volatile than entertainment. "That's completely different, and you know it," Harry shot back, his diplomatic mask finally beginning to slip. "I'm telling my own story, not having lies and speculation printed about me. There's a fundamental difference between truth and tabloid fiction." "Is there, though?" Colbert pressed, clearly enjoying the effect his words were having. "Because half the stuff in your book reads like the kind of gossip column your mother spent her life running from." private conversations with your father, intimate details about your brother, family secrets that were never meant for public consumption. How is that any different from what the paparazzi were doing, except now you're the one behind the camera? Harry's hands gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white with tension. Because it's my life, Stephen. My family. My story to tell. And after years of having other people control the narrative, I have every right to set the record straight. Your family. Colbert's voice dripped with mock incredulity. I thought you walked away from all that. I thought you wanted nothing to do with the royal family. But here you are, still dining out on every royal connection you have. You can't have it both ways, Harry. You can't reject the institution and then use it as your meal ticket. The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees as Harry leaned forward, his eyes blazing with an anger that years of royal protocol had never quite managed to extinguish. You know what, Stephen? I came here tonight to talk about mental health, about the importance of breaking cycles of trauma, about using your platform to make a positive difference. But it's clear you're more interested in cheap shots and gotcha moments than having a real conversation. Colbert's grin widened, sensing he had his guest exactly where he wanted him. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I hurt your feelings? Is this the part where you storm off and write another chapter about how mean the American talk show host was to you? Because that would certainly fit the pattern, wouldn't it? The words hit Harry like a physical blow, and for a moment it looked like he might actually leave right then and there. But instead, something shifted in his expression, a steely determination replacing the hurt and anger. The prince who had walked away from centuries of tradition was about to show Stephen Colbert exactly what happened when you pushed him too far. Harry sat back in his chair, a cold smile playing across his lips that would have been familiar to anyone who had ever crossed the Windsor family. You know what, Stephen? You want to talk about patterns? Let's talk about your pattern. You sit behind this desk every night, tearing down people who are actually trying to make a difference in the world, while you contribute nothing but cynicism and cheap laughs. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the respectful, diplomatic Harry they had expected. This was someone who had been pushed past his breaking point and was now fighting back with everything he had. Colbert's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered in his eyes. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I touch a nerve? Are we going to get another chapter about the mean American comedian now? Maybe you can write about how I triggered your trauma response. Trauma response? Harry's voice rose for the first time, cutting through the studio like a blade. You want to talk about trauma, Stephen? Let's talk about watching your mother get chased to her death by photographers. Let's talk about being forced to walk behind her coffin while the world watched. Let's talk about having every mistake, every relationship, every moment of grief turned into entertainment for people like you. The studio had gone dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut to commercial. Colbert, for the first time all evening, appeared momentarily thrown off his game. But he recovered quickly, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. And there it is again. The tragedy card. The Diana defense. Every time someone calls you out on your hypocrisy, you hide behind your mother's death. It's become your get-out-of-jail-free card, hasn't it? If Colbert thought he had delivered a knockout blow, he was wrong. Harry's eyes blazed with fury, but his voice became deadly quiet. My mother's death isn't a card, Stephen. It's the defining moment of my life. And you know what the real tragedy is? She died trying to escape the very thing you're doing right now. Creating a spectacle out of human suffering for ratings and applause. Human suffering? Colbert laughed, but it sounded forced now. You live in a mansion in California, Harry. You have more money than most people could spend in 10 lifetimes. You've got Netflix writing you checks, publishers bidding for your stories. Where exactly is the suffering? In that? Harry leaned forward, his voice carrying an edge that made several audience members visibly flinch. The suffering is in watching people like you reduce everything to a punchline. The suffering is in trying to build something meaningful while parasites like you tear it down for content. You think this is entertainment? You think destroying people is comedy? I think, Colbert said, his voice now carrying a genuine edge of malice, that you're a spoiled brat who walked away from the most privileged life in history and now wants everyone to feel sorry for him. You want to be a victim so badly that you'll rewrite history to make it happen. The accusation hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Harry's face went white, then red, then settled into something that looked carved from stone. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet that the audience had to strain to hear him. A victim? You think I want to be a victim? I walked away from everything, Stephen. I gave up titles, money, security, my relationship with my family. I gave up the only life I'd ever known. Not because I wanted to be a victim, but because I refused to be one anymore. And yet here you are, Colbert pressed, sensing weakness, playing the victim card on every talk show that'll have you, selling your family's secrets to the highest bidder, trading on your mother's death for sympathy and your royal connections for cash. If that's not being a professional victim, I don't know what is. Harry stood up so abruptly that his chair rolled backward. The movement was so sudden, so violent that several audience members gasped audibly. He looked down at Colbert with something that might have been pity if it weren't so cold. You know what the difference is between us, Stephen? When I left my family, I lost everything. When you attack people on this show, you go home to your comfortable life and your fat paycheck. You're not brave. You're not speaking truth to power. You're just another bully hiding behind a microphone. Colbert's mask finally slipped completely. Bully? I'm a bully? That's rich coming from someone who spent years throwing tantrums whenever. The press didn't kiss his ass. At least I'm honest about what I do. I don't pretend to be some noble crusader while cashing checks from streaming services. Honest? Harry's laugh was bitter and sharp. You want to talk about honesty? Let's be honest about what this is. This isn't an interview. This is an execution. You brought me here to humiliate me, to tear me down, to turn my pain into your punchline. And the saddest part is, your audience is cheering you on. The camera caught several audience members looking genuinely uncomfortable now, some even appearing ashamed of their earlier laughter. The mood in the studio had shifted dramatically from entertainment to something that felt genuinely ugly. Colbert, perhaps sensing he had gone too far, tried to regain some semblance of control. Look, Harry, this is what happens when you put yourself out there. If you can't handle the heat, maybe you shouldn't have left the kitchen. But Harry was past the point of diplomatic retreat. Handle the heat? I've handled more heat than you could imagine, Stephen. I've been shot at in Afghanistan while you were making jokes about politicians. I've buried friends, held dying children, watched my marriage fall apart under scrutiny you couldn't comprehend. Don't lecture me about handling heat. And yet you ran away, Colbert shot back, his voice now openly hostile. The moment things got tough, you ran away to California and started pointing fingers at everyone else. That's not courage, Harry. That's cowardice. The word hung in the air like a slap. Harry's hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment it looked like the interview might end in something far worse than harsh words. But instead of striking out, Harry did something that seemed to surprise even himself. He smiled, but it was the most dangerous smile anyone in that studio had ever seen. Cowardice, Harry repeated slowly, savoring the word like fine wine. That's fascinating coming from someone who's never risked anything more dangerous than a bad review. Tell me, Stephen, when was the last time you put your life on the line for something you believed in? When did you last sacrifice anything meaningful for a principle? Colbert's confidence began to waver as Harry's tone shifted from defensive to something far more menacing. I don't need to justify my— No, Harry interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone born to command. "You want to talk about cowardice? Let's examine your courage, shall we? You sit in this comfortable studio, surrounded by your writers and your audience, and your security, and you tear down people who are actually out there doing the work. That takes real bravery, doesn't it?" The audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Harry began to pace slightly like a predator circling its prey, his royal bearing fully restored and transformed into something formidable. "You know what I find most pathetic about you, Stephen? You think cynicism makes you smart. You think tearing people down makes you relevant. But all it really does is reveal how small you are, how frightened you are, of anyone who's actually trying to make a difference." Colbert tried to regain control, his voice cracking slightly. "Listen, Harry, I think we should..." "Should what? Should stop now that you're not winning anymore?" Harry's laugh was sharp and cutting. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? You wanted to provoke me, to get me to lose control so you could have your viral moment. Well, congratulations. You're getting exactly what you asked for." Harry stopped pacing and fixed Colbert with a stare that seemed to pin him to his chair. "You want to know the real difference between us? When I served in Afghanistan, I knew that every day might be my last. I flew missions knowing I might not come home. I've held dying soldiers in my arms and watched good people pay the ultimate price for something bigger than themselves." His voice grew quieter but somehow more intense. "And you? You've spent your entire career hiding behind comedy, using humor as a shield so you never have to take a real stand on anything that matters. At least the tabloid photographers who killed my mother had the honesty to admit they were parasites. You dress up your parasitism as social commentary." Colbert's face had gone ashen. The man who had built his career on never being at a loss for words seemed genuinely speechless. The audience sat in stunned silence, many looking horrified at what they were witnessing. Harry leaned forward, placing both hands on Colbert's desk, his face inches from the host's. "You called me a coward for walking away from my family. Let me tell you what real cowardice looks like. Real cowardice is spending your life tearing down people who are trying to build something better. Real cowardice is using someone's deepest pain as material for your monologue. Real cowardice is hiding behind an audience full of people who laugh at cruelty because you've convinced them it's entertainment." The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Several cameramen had stopped operating their equipment, unsure whether they should continue filming what felt like a public execution. "You want to mock my mother's death?" Harry's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the studio like thunder. "You want to turn my family's dysfunction into comedy? Here's something you can joke about. I walked away from billions of dollars, from power, from privilege that you can't even comprehend, because I refuse to be part of a system that destroys people. And what have you walked away from, Stephen? What have you ever sacrificed for your principles?" Colbert finally found his voice, but it came out as barely more than a croak. "Harry, I think we should..." "We should what? Call security? Cut to commercial? Run away?" Harry straightened up, towering over the seated host. "That's your solution to everything, isn't it? When things get uncomfortable, when someone fights back, you just change the subject or make a joke. Well, I'm not laughing anymore." Harry turned to face the audience directly, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who had addressed nations. "You came here tonight expecting entertainment. You got exactly what you paid for. You watched a man try to destroy another human being for your amusement, and most of you cheered him on. I hope you're proud of yourselves." Several audience members looked genuinely ashamed, some covering their faces or looking away entirely. The atmosphere in the studio had become suffocating, thick with tension and regret. Harry turned back to Colbert, who seemed to have shrunk in his chair. "You know what the saddest part is? You could have used this platform for something meaningful. You could have had a real conversation about mental health, about breaking cycles of trauma, about the cost of public service. Instead, you chose cruelty. You chose to be exactly what's wrong with this world. He straightened his jacket with deliberate precision, every movement calculated and controlled. I came here tonight in good faith, hoping to have a meaningful dialogue. Instead, I found exactly what I left England to escape: a system that feeds on human suffering and calls it entertainment. Harry looked directly into the main camera, his voice steady and clear. To anyone watching this who's struggling with their own demons, who's trying to break free from toxic situations, who's been told they're a coward for choosing their mental health over other people's expectations, don't let people like this convince you that speaking your truth makes you weak. Don't let them turn your pain into their punchline. He turned back to Colbert one final time. And you, Stephen. I genuinely feel sorry for you. Because at the end of the day, I'll go home to a family that loves me, to work that matters, to a life I chose rather than one that was chosen for me. And you'll go home knowing that when you had the chance to be better, to be kinder, to use your platform for good, you chose to be exactly what everyone expects from people in your position. Disappointing. With that, Harry walked away from the desk with the measured pace of someone who had never doubted his own dignity. He didn't storm off in anger or frustration. He simply left, like royalty dismissing themselves from an audience that was no longer worthy of their time. Colbert sat, frozen in his chair, his trademark smirk completely gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like shame. The audience remained silent, the weight of what they had witnessed settling over them like a heavy blanket. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of Colbert's humiliation, the empty chair where his guest had been, and an audience that suddenly understood they had been complicit in something truly ugly. The Late Show would cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Social media was already exploding with clips of the confrontation, and by morning, Stephen Colbert would wake up to discover that his attempt to destroy Prince Harry had backfired spectacularly. Instead of creating a viral moment of royal humiliation, he had revealed himself to be exactly the kind of person Harry had accused him of being. The interview that was supposed to boost his ratings would instead mark the beginning of their dramatic decline, as viewers turned away from a host who had crossed a line from which there was no return.